This is a 1999 Eclipse Pro 32 by 40 machine. We've made several videos on this machine that you can find on the CMC Doctor YouTube channel. This is the most recent upgrade. I've got a custom built stand here for the monitor, keyboard, mouse, and the computer sitting right here. Okay, shelves, bins for extras, things like that. This machine has had the button panel moved from the front location here over to the side. You've got your on-off switch, emergency stop, and your clamp. This machine also has a foot clamp, which is right here. You can use it to clamp the mat board, or you can use the hand switch. This machine also has upgrades to the cutting head. So it has a V-groove switch here. On push it to the left like this for a V-groove. Push it to the right like that for cutting. This is the blade stop. There are three functional positions. This is a 4-ply, 6-ply, and 8-ply position. By loosening the blade and moving it out of the way, you can move the stop to the different positions, and that adjusts your blade depth. That's on 4-ply right there. Okay. This also has a upgraded mat foot, and there are some lines machined into the mat foot here. If you cut 8-ply, you can only wear down to the first line. If you cut 4-ply exclusively, you could go down to the second line. But when you wear down to the first line, you should change the mat foot, and it's easy. You just loosen these 4 screws and replace the white plastic piece. Okay. This is the only thing that controls blade depth. Okay, in combination with the 2 switches, but this is your fine tuning of your blade depth. Okay. Again, this machine has a Sintra, a black Sintra. It essentially creates the surface for clamping the mat board. If this isn't there, then we couldn't have this gap and the clamps couldn't work. This is not a cutting surface. You should put in a slip sheet, a sacrificial piece of mat board, and then the mat board that you're going to cut. On this machine, I have removed the motion controller from the computer. Originally it had an ISA based controller, and in one of the other videos we put a PCI based controller in there, and now I've removed that PCI based controller and interconnection module, and I've replaced it with an Ethernet based controller. So now there's an Ethernet cable here that runs down through the bottom of the machine, comes out the bottom of the machine, and runs over to the back of the PC there. This computer is running Windows 10 64-bit. Okay, in putting the Ethernet controller card in, this board right here has optical isolation on it for inputs and outputs. So that allows me to reconfigure this section of the machine and eliminate 3 output relays and 3 input relays. These are just indicator lights here. They're not actually relays, because the isolation between the machine and the controller is done all on this board. There's connections for the X servo drive, Y servo drive, and Z servo drive. These contain the control line, which runs the amplifiers. That's the blue line, and it contains the white, green, yellow, and blue, and those are encoder feedback that run up through the machine to the motors. This connection, this large connection right here, this is all inputs, outputs, and limit switches. This machine also has current technology servo drives for the motors, 5-volt power supply, 24-volt power supply, grounds, and this is a contactor which turns on power to this power supply which runs the motors. There are also 2 fuse blocks down here, one for the 24-volt power supply, one for the 5-volt power supply, which is up here. This 24-volt power supply is now powering outputs, plus it is powering the controller card through this connection here. In a previous video, I showed you an ELU, or Eclipse logic unit, which sat on the stand next to the computer. That had a 12-volt power supply in it and required the 100-pin SCSI cable to remain in place. By using this standalone 24 volts controller, you don't have to use any of those parts anymore, and you eliminate some relays here. There is a serial port here for configuring the controller if we need to. There's also a master reset for resetting the controller if we need to. Same connections for air connection here. This has an on-off valve here. This filter regulator unit controls the whole system and the clamps. So this is set at 80 psi. This pressure switch looks for 80 psi. If it doesn't have 80 psi, the machine can't run. The output down below here goes around here and to the clamp valve. Let's see if I can get that better. So follow this hose around and it goes into the clamp valve. The clamp valve has a 1/4-inch tube here and here and an exhaust muffler. Okay, now this regulator controls the cutting head, and it should be set at 40 psi. So the output for this regulator is here. You follow this hose over here and it runs up to this valve. Okay, this valve has 5/32 tube on the top, an exhaust muffler, 1/4-inch input. Okay. If we start the Eclipse software, which is the Create software, we can design a mat. Say we want to make it a diamond shape. Go in here and pick diamond and put that on all 4 corners. Send this to the cut program. Do you want to initialize and reset the machine? Yes. So the machine's now reset. And now we can press cut. Oh, turn the clamps on. Retry. Now I don't have the cutting head closed. I'm running it with it open. If I wanted to cut something, I would need to lock it closed. But I didn't want to cut anything in that instance. So you can see it all works. And if I go to setup and I go to settings, system, about, you can see this is a i5 CPU, 3.2 gigahertz, 16 gig of RAM, 64-bit operating system. Windows 10. It could be home, it doesn't need to be pro. Okay, so there you go. This is an Eclipse built in 1999 that has been upgraded to run on Windows 10 64-bit operating system using an Ethernet-based controller.